Hello,
Hello.
Hello.
Chris. Welcome to the Between the Ears podcast. Thank you for being on and always being so generous with your time.
Well, thanks, Bill. I don't know how we're going to do this in an hour.
I know. I know. We'll have to have part 2 and 3 and 4, but it's good to have some rails to keep us, you know.
The last time we were chatting, Cariana and Heidi had to be like, "Okay, enough." Like
Well, we got
it's like in
kicked
the
out of the
bar.
restaurant. They were closing. Otherwise, we
they
would have
turn the
still
lights
been there.
on and they're like putting the tables up or the stools upside down. Yeah, it's good
Or
stuff.
dinner at your house, Heidi. Yeah, dinner at your house. She's like, you got to work tomorrow morning early. We got to go.
Yeah,
But that's a good thing. That's a good
I
thing.
know, it's really nice. Really nice. Yeah, I do have a tendency to struggle in conversations, and I always find it interesting when something that somebody has done in their past or their content dives deep, and all of a sudden it turns from I got to get out of here because I'm bored to death to where it's like I want to see where this goes. And yeah, we've had a couple of good ones, and yeah, I think that's why it's going to be tough to finish this in an hour for me. So just keep it short.
All right, I'll be the cutoff. I'm good at that. Well, this part we can keep a little short. Give us a little background, like obviously how we know you, give us a little, obviously people know who you are, but for someone who might not, or a little bit of the background.
So I'm an endurance coach or a specialist, primarily in the CrossFit space, but I do a lot of work with first responders, military, fire, law enforcement. My background as an athlete, I was a swimmer as a kid. Very late in developing, I got into the sport of triathlons, and as I started to develop when I was in my late teens, early 20s, I had some success. I got sucked into Ironman distance events, and yeah, I think if you race enough, you have some good genetics, you end up doing well, and that set me on a pretty a positive trajectory. So in a nutshell, that's my background as a coach, as well as an athlete.
And some of the highlights as an athlete, like we're talking winner of Ironman, winner of major situations, not just like, hey, I signed up and I did it. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but
yeah,
on top of the podium.
I ended up, I got second place in the World Championships. I got second in Kona. I placed in the top 10 at Kona a few times. I was a specialist. It's kind of a curse, right? That to be able to be good at something, unfortunately, that something takes 9 hours. I wish it was like, could you imagine being a 100-meter sprinter and actually get tired and you're already done? Like you don't get tired while doing something.
Right.
To me, I enjoyed it. I find endurance training very appealing. It's very cathartic. It's very thought provoking. It's internal.
Yeah.
And I'm what you call a social introvert. I mean, I could have a conversation, but it's difficult for me. I rather just deal with my own thoughts. And so endurance training, 10-hour bike rides, it was appealing to me. And it still is appealing to me. That's why I struggle with short time domain, high intensity CrossFit workouts. I don't find enjoyment in that because it's not thought provoking in the moment.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Do you find it thought provoking, like, kind of like a wave crashing and you see it come up the coast, like thought provoking after, or just generally not in any way?
I find it thought provoking afterwards. I'm very strategic in the way in which I go about things. And I'll give you an example. So if I look at a workout that I've never done before, one of the things that I like to do is estimate how much time it's going to take me down to the second. And I look at all the variables and I think about, my strategy in it. And I really, really try and take ownership in that approach. And then afterwards, I think about how well I did in my estimation of total time, and also where were the opportunities for me to improve. And I find that a lot of individuals, they just go in and just do what they're told. They freestyle it and they walk out and never think about it. They just think, oh, I just did the workout. And there's value in that, but not the highest value. If they took some ownership, if they took possession of it, like I'm saying that I do, there is more value because you now have created like a history. You have something to look back on and reflect because you own it. And I find that a lot of athletes that right now, today, they say they want to, compete and get on the podium, but they don't take any ownership. Well, if you don't know where you've been, how do you know where you're going?
Yeah.
And so that's what I think about, as far as like those short workouts. I try to take ownership in it to help me do a better job the next time. And that's ultimately what we're trying to do, right? To maximize the value of that training time, to maximize your adaptation. I mean, why would you go there and train and suffer and get 80% of the potential value?
Yeah, that trap of the 80% is far and wide and very common, I think, to have. When you're walking, when being military or whatever, when you're walking through, typically it's like a wooded area, but the ground that you're walking on will influence you and push you in certain directions. And downhill is typically where you'll naturally walk if you aren't paying attention. And of course, if you're walking down, typically where we do a lot of training, like you're going to get wet and it's going to be generally miserable and it's going to be kind of shitty in addition to potentially not being as tactically sound. But that whole component of like just settling in or mindlessly having the environment or the terrain dictate where you go, yeah, to your point, removes you from being able to guide and orient to where you really want to go or where you're trying to go. And it's almost that like the 80% kind of channels you into this valley of not mediocrity, but limitation, I suppose.
Yeah, a lot of people ask me, when you do an Ironman, a full distance Ironman, like Hawaii, Kona, what do you think about? And, like you just said, you following the terrain and you follow the easiest path. Well, when you're doing something at maximal effort for 9 hours, are you really truly thinking, or are you trying to disassociate yourself from your suffering? Because you are suffering. I mean, imagine you do a 2.4 mile ocean swim, you ride 112 miles across the lava fields of Hawaii, battling in some cases 30 to 40 mile an hour headwinds. And you're now 6 hours in and you got to run 26.2 miles in the heat of the day of Hawaii. And you're trying to race at maximal effort based upon that amount of time. And so you're on, it's called, on the rivet, where, bike seats used to be made out of leather and there used to be a rivet right on the end of the bike seat. And so you'd just be right on the edge of that rivet the whole time. And, what do you think about? Well, you are trying to disassociate with your fatigue, your pain, and only think about strategic moves. And that is the hardest skill for an athlete to learn. And I must assume in the military, under fatigue, you make bad decisions. And you teach how to stay strategic as that fatigue builds and builds and builds. And that's where I see the greatest failure in athletes, especially within the CrossFit space, because they don't go long enough to deal with that negative propagation and how it interferes with strategic thought.
And would you say that when you see athletes at the games, that's not that it's a long workout per se, but day 2, day 3, they're kind of in that long and they're in the hole and they haven't, because their body has now taken on suffering. It might not be one effort, obviously, but what's your experience like? I mean, obviously that's an area that you've experienced.
That's one of the key areas. I mean, this is where Camille, I got to tell you, so I started working with Camille LeBlanc-Bazinet, who won the CrossFit Games in 14. I started working with her in June of 2013. I was introduced to her. It's kind of funny. So I was introduced to her. She shows up one day at the track, and I was doing a workout with Jason Khalipa. And it was a month out of the first games that I was going to go to. And I'd been working with Jason for 6 months. And she shows up and just jumps into the workout. And I didn't know her. But anyway, was welcome. And after the workout, she comes up and she says, so you be my coach? And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what? Like, we're not even talking about. And she said, so you be my coach, and we go to the game, and if we win, you stay my coach. If we don't do a win, then I don't ever call you again. And I'm like, the drive home, I'm like, that's so rude. But then I started backing up a little bit, and I'm like, this individual is right. Like, what we really need to be doing is we need to deliver greatness, because her window of time is so short. And Camille was a smart athlete, right? She has an engineering degree, and she recognized like you said, Karian, the accumulation of fatigue, right? Because the CrossFit Games is an endurance competition. And she told me, she said, I want to work with you, and I want to do everything possible to be in the best position on the last day. Mm-hmm. And that to me was genius, that she recognized that value on that last day. And how can we put you in that best position to dominate? I mean, look at Rich Froning. That's why he's the greatest, because he recognized that that's the day that the champion is actually crowned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, growing up, I played soccer at high levels, and I remember my dad, who was my first coach, and even once I, kind of advanced beyond where he was coaching and different things, he told me that, I forget what in the World Cups, it was like 80% of the goals were scored in the last 10 minutes. And of course, there's, another 20% of that, but it's such a great thing to look at, and a frame to have your training be not built around entirely, but significantly influenced by, hey, when I can then learn to recognize when somebody's struggling, when somebody's, eyes wide open and they're breathing into their chest and they're looking at the ground, it's like, oh, I'm going to go after you harder now. And or looking up at those moments of fatigue. There's this quote that fatigue makes a coward of us all, or something like that. I don't know, Churchill said it or something, but when we get tired, we make mistakes. Mm-hmm. And how just incredibly effective that is as a teacher, as a natural teacher, and endurance being almost this hedge against the inevitable atrophy of your physical, your psychological skill sets, and to improve and to move that and to prevent that atrophy from occurring is almost this beautiful notion of endurance, and where it's really a beautiful pursuit, I think.
Well, that's it's interesting. After elite level CrossFitters, when they leave CrossFit, here they've focused on shorter time domains. There is an interesting evolution of that athlete. They want to test their ability to endure. Mm-hmm. They want to know where the edge of their boundary is in terms of endurance. And it's fascinating to see that migration over, where it's like, oh, now right. I get it. And that is the interesting thing for me, is that here these champions are now going long, and their perspective is now different. Mm. And what they're recognizing is the contributions and the sayings that I kept telling them all the time, that you need to have a better balance. And what I meant by balance is a relationship with that other side of the equation. Yeah. And I think that that's where the growth is going to occur on the elite level, a recognition that segment of what we think is long is not long.
Right.
And where does it then take the sport? And there's very few athletes. Like Haley Adams is one of the very few anomalies out there in terms of her ability that she tomorrow can run 13 miles and compete the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And she would run that 13 hard. That's a very rare athlete. Now, genetically, people may think, oh, that's, why she's not strong. No. She has that background and she has an understanding and an ability of what 13.1 miles of running means. If you've never run 13.1 miles, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Right.
And that's why you see like these CrossFitters that like to run a marathon. I've seen it before where, I got a gift card into Boston. I'm going to run it and I'm just going to make myself run 26.2. Yeah, good luck with that.
Right.
Yeah. The phone call afterwards, it's like, I don't know what happened.
Right.
I was going 14, 15-minute miles and I was trying to run, but I just couldn't. I don't know why. Yeah, well, now you'll rethink your day 4 at the games.
Yeah.
It is interesting how we have on the one end the duration of endurance and how long means something. It's not like 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Murph is not long. No. Like these workouts at 30 minutes to 60 minutes, like that's not really long. But of course, within the CrossFit space and functional fitness, whatever, that might be longer than normal, but that doesn't mean long.
Right.
But then there's also this thing about short as well.
Mm-hmm.
And the shorter, a different type of pain occurs or a different type of suffering. I love this notion of being strategic with your suffering that you're talking about, and obviously taking your courses and knowing, just learning from you. That's one of the things that you really empower and educate people on. But we've also noticed how okay, you're not going long, but if we say do something in less than a minute, there's this hesitation to do that as well.
Yep.
And specifically, we have this program, the first workout, the dose, the workout. You did that. You did it. You've been dosed. That was on the complete other side of the spectrum when it comes to endurance. How did your dose workout go?
So I looked at that workout. First of all, I really like the way that workout is structured. I like that it takes into account an individual's body weight. I like that. I think that's very important because on a piece of equipment, an echo bike or a bike erg, your weight is supported by the object. And so a bigger person, a person with more lean muscle mass, is going to generate more wattage. They're going to generate more power output, and it's unfair. And so what you did is you made it so that argument goes away. And I like that. It's like, okay, this sounds reasonable. What I end up doing is I look at a workout like that and 10% of my body weight, I weigh 160 to 163 pounds. So 16 cows. And then to get up to 50%. Okay, so I look at that and I go, okay, so I've got, to get up to 50%, I've got to, do 5 rounds. We actually made a mistake and did 10 rounds.
Oh my God.
You're psycho. I love it. I love it. Yes.
And so 10 minutes to me is a frightening time domain. 5 minutes isn't that bad. It's basically a mile, and it's not that scary for me. In a 5-minute time domain, I knew if I got to minute 4, I'd be home free. And in a workout like that, I think that's a manageable time domain. But 10 minutes is a scary time domain because a lot of damage can occur. So if I look at a 10-minute time domain, I'm thinking, you know what? Round 8 is going to be really hard for me. But if I make it through round 8, I know I could do 9 and 10. What I took was that strategy. My job is to just be patient and just get to round 8. If I get to round 8, then I know I'm close enough to the finish line where I can bring it home. And the key is what level of fatigue, what damage would be created, because I've never done this workout before, by the time I got to round 8. And I always want to make sure that I know approximately how much pain I will be in at that sticking point. because if I underestimate that amount of pain, I will underperform. So what I'm trying to do is match my perceived amount of pain before the workout with the actual amount of pain at that particular point. And so there's balance. And that was a hard thing for me because the other piece was, which probably makes it more balanced, is the gym, CrossFit Fort Vancouver, where we go, they were using all the Echo bikes that day. So I had to do it on a bike erg. Now, a bike erg for me is not that bad. So I was pleasantly surprised at when I got to 8 minutes that I felt better than I thought I was going to feel. Now don't think that I felt great, but I felt better, which was a confidence boost for me. And so, yeah, I walked out of there and I felt good about it. Heidi, my better half, did it side by side, and it rocked her. Now, she went to Pilates that morning, which I don't know what she was thinking. And so if she was here, she would tell you that, no, that was a devastating workout. But luckily, she was the individual that picked the 10 rounds. Like I just, so.
Just did whatever. It's funny that perception. So we did this workout every week for 4 weeks to see the progress. And I mean, I have a sense of what 13 calories is like on the Echo bike, but I've never done that every minute, 13, And so I got on and I started, and within 30 seconds, I said to Bill, I can't do this. I can't do this. I was 30 seconds in.
No, you finished the first round.
Okay.
And then
maybe I finished the first round. Yeah. It was within 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And, Bill's like, just keep going. I mean, and the only thing, like, first of all, can't do this. I mean, you might have to take a minute off, but you can. Like, it's physically possible. But the pain and realizing and projecting, like, wow, I underestimated the pain. I overestimated myself.
Yeah.
Now I didn't stop, but I might as well have, because that popping up was like, then week 2, I was prepared. I knew the pain. And someone had said to us, like, in a recent seminar, when they know the pain, they don't want to go back and do a workout where they already know the pain. And I found that kind of interesting. But in many ways for me, like, knowing the pain that's going to come, you're kind of prepared and like, okay, and am I willing and am I ready to endure that?
That's interesting to me. So it takes me back to when I started CrossFit, and I dreaded those short time domains because it was a space that I didn't actually experience. I wasn't ever trained in that way. And in order to get myself to where I wasn't afraid or intimidated, where I was willing to take an extraordinary risk, right, in a workout, I had to take it into my own space where I was safe, and that was in the movement of running. And so what did I do? When I started CrossFit, I was starting to be able to run again, and it was like, you know what? I'm not going to go out and do an easy run today. I'm going to do CrossFit style. And so what would I do? The first thing that would pop into my head, which was the only thing I didn't want to do, which was either a 2-mile time trial or a 5K time trial. And I would do 5Ks 3 times a week at maximal intensity. And I did it for probably 4 months, where it was like, it was either 2 miles, sometimes 1.5 miles would pop into my head, but it would be the first thing that I didn't want to do. And that was my workout. And it was always a max effort time trial. After about 4 months, I don't care anymore. Whatever you want to give me. And that I wish I had when I competed, because I would avoid courses that had hilly running, that required more power output. I liked hilly bike ride because my power to weight ratio, but not running on trails. And so I would avoid it. And I wish that I had this ability back then, where I wasn't running away from something because I felt I wasn't good at it.
Yeah.
And it reframed everything for me. Like, that's what CrossFit did. It made me realize that the other side of the equation, that anaerobic lactate tolerant side of the equation, like this workout, how the value it would contribute in terms of being well-rounded.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why the mindset, like we wrote up about, and the concept mindset, psychological intention with it is this notion of tolerance.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so important, I think, that people understand also your point about it. So tolerance and exposure are, peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
In order to improve our tolerance, we need to titrate or gradually increase our exposure to something. However, if the peanut butter is tolerance and the jelly is exposure, the bread that keeps it together is safety. And we need safety. And this is true in clinical psychotherapy. This is true in strength and conditioning. And certainly in anecdotal evidence, as supported by you, like a world-class athlete saying, look, if I'm going to get better at this thing that's new, that I don't have as much exposure to, and I'm perceiving I can't quite tolerate what's required to do that because it's just new, it's just something I haven't been exposed to, I need to find safety in something that I can expose myself to build that tolerance, the presence of those signals physiologically, what it's like to be like, oh my God, my lungs literally just exploded. My legs are painful, which is feeding upstairs to, I can't, I'm not good, but boom, all of the psychology and how training tolerance has such spillover to outside of the gym. And it's so, I think, valuable to know that, like, okay, hey, if we want to get better at tolerating something, yeah, we need to do it more, but we also have to have it contained within an experience that is safe. Otherwise our nervous system and just the natural protective responses are going to reject it and say no, and that's intolerance. That's what we're not going to be tolerant of. And it's really cool to hear that also plays into not only what you experience, but also like you help athletes improve upon what they can tolerate also by not giving them unrealistic expectations, but individualized custom plans. I mean, you've told us the story where you're, individualizing a workout for a battalion of Marines. Like, give me 10 seconds and I'll have everybody, and it's just really cool to kind of, see how this notion is understood, practiced, and also shared, within this kind of fitness exploration we're all in.
Well, I think that's the important piece, is that an individual must take some accountability. They must be willing to recognize their own individual strengths and weaknesses, their limitations. And like you said, even in your daily life, avoidance of an issue is not going to make you more well-rounded. It's not. And that's what I did as an athlete. I avoided events that were not in my sweet spot. And that was a mistake, because every single time that I would encounter an obstacle that was not something that I trained, it would be perceived as a negative. And that would take me down a rabbit hole. And you never, as an athlete, want negative thought to enter, because there's always a risk that it propagates. And so that was a weakness. And the problem was, I knew it, but I didn't do anything about it. And now as a coach, what I'll do is I will write a workout, and it will be a simple workout. And it will be with a group of people. And here's the workout. We're going to do 10 rounds, and it's going to be a 10-second sprint followed up by 1 minute easy. 10 rounds. And I want that 10-second sprint as fast as you possibly can go. The people that are fast twitch, speed, power, strength athletes, right? Better in short time domains. I want you on the right side of the room. And the endurance athletes, the ones that are ability to go long, the ones that have a great ability to recover, I want you on the left side of the room. Now, before the workout, what I want you to do is I want you to be thinking about what should your priority be based upon your strengths and weaknesses. So me, I'm an endurance athlete. So in this workout, what should be my focus? And what my limitation is, my inability to recruit fast twitch fibers immediately. Where if you take a fast twitch dominant athlete at 3, 2, 1, go, all of their fast twitch fibers fire. Their problem is they can't shut them off. And if they don't shut them off in about a minute and a half, they're done. They're going to walk. And so my focus is always on the acceleration into speed, that I need to be really focused on that trigger point. Now, the opposite side, the people on the other side of the room, those fast twitch dominant athletes, their job is to not even think during the sprint, because that will happen on autopilot and it's going to be enjoyable to them. Their job is, as they transition from that sprint to the recovery, how long does it actually take for them to get back in control of that slow speed? And so if you don't know, right, then who you are, then how do you know how to attack a workout like that? And you know what you'll do? You just go through the motions. And
You'll
that
do what you're good at.
and you know what you get? Mediocrity at the end.
Yeah.
And all you're doing is avoiding
Right.
the thing that is preventing you from getting to the next level. And I have a lot of regret when I think back on my days as an athlete, and I could have been better. And this avoidance was the thing that got in my way. And I didn't fix it until I got into CrossFit and was introduced to another side of the equation. I thought that I was dealing with the whole spectrum when in fact I was only dealing with half.
Mm-hmm. I can't help but think about how, so one of our things is that, like, our mantra sort of between the years is educate, empower, engage. And the education, we want to provide people whatever, basically the what, different types of things, knowledge, blah, blah, blah. Empower them is this notion of, hey, I can do this, right? This personal empowerment, this, maybe it's courage, maybe it's bravery, maybe it's confidence, belief, curiosity. And then engage is like, okay, the actual experience to act and to live and to do this thing. And in hearing you talk about, the 10 rounds, 10 seconds into 1 minute, the type 1 athlete is going to do, et cetera. The type 2 athlete is going to do this or that. In your experience, have you found a approachable test that people can engage in that might educate them as to, are they a type 2 dominant athlete, a type 1, like, without going to, Stanford School of Biomechanics and getting some, laboratory tests done? Anything that you've come across that kind of gives a decent idea on what they might default to or be?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I had biopsies done, and that's how I had a decent idea. And I mean, it's if you know somebody and you're in the right place, it's not a bad process. But no, so there is a couple of different tests. And it's interesting, like when you look at basketball players or volleyball players, when they jump and they take their approach, whether it's 2-step, 3-step approach, and then they make the jump. What I look for is, do their knees bend, or do they essentially pogo? And an endurance slow twitch athlete will bend because they're not going to have that reactive force that a fast twitch dominant athlete would do, and so, or what you would experience. And so you would look for the bending of the knees. Now, in terms of running, there is a test that I create, and this was the one that I gave to the FFI, the Force Fitness instructors at Camp Pendleton. And what it was a 100-meter sprint, but that sprint speed needs to be at your 400-meter PR pace. So if you take your 400-meter time, let's say it's a minute, you could run a lap around the track, then you would have to do that 100 meters in 15 seconds. After the 100-meter sprint, you're going to jog at whatever speed you want the remainder of that lap, so 300 meters. You're going to do that 5 times with no rest. You must hit that 15-second or that pace for the 100 meters, which means that you run that 300 as slow as you want in order to make that time. Now, what you're going to do in this workout is you're going to add up the total amount of time that 5 laps takes. All right. At the end of the 5 laps, you're going to have this time. And what you'll end up doing is subtracting out your total sprint time. So in this case, you remove 75 seconds. And what was left was your total amount of jog time. Well, how much jogging did you do? Well, you did 1,500 meters of jogging. Now you could come up with your average jog pace. The relationship between your sprint and your jog is 2-to-1, meaning if it took you 15 seconds per 100 meters to do your sprint, then you optimally should have a 30-second jog average for a 100-meter pace. If you do, you're ideal. But what if you have an average jog pace of 32 seconds compared to your sprint of 15? That means I've got to improve my jog by 2 seconds. So what should you work on? Your endurance. Likewise, what if it's on the other side of the equation where you have a 16-second sprint time and a 30-second jog? Well, I got to get my 16 down to 15. I need to work on speed. And there's a very simple way that if you wanted to do it in a workout, of whether or not you need to spend more time on your speed, your strength, your power, or you need to work on your aerobic, slow twitch endurance. Mm-hmm. And that's what I gave to the FFI athletes. And for them, they used their 800-meter combat fitness test time, which was just enough. It was fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You have to, you're right. One of the things that I have to hand it to Glassman that he made very clear was your result. You have to have measurable results. Otherwise, how do you know you're getting better? Yeah. And as a coach, if I don't provide something measurable to an athlete to use that result of designing a progression or some next workout, why would they do it? They have to be proven, like, this is why I'm going in this particular direction.
Right.
Like a lot of athletes, they're doing zone 2 training. I love it. Mm-hmm. But remember, your muscles are actually doing the work, not your heart. Mm. And so is it your speed that is limiting your performance, or is it your cardiorespiratory system? Which one of those is preventing you? And so a lot of athletes will do a zone 2 workout for an hour, and they'll start out at a decent rate of speed, and then they'll end up at that same heart rate from start to finish, but they'll end up walking. Well, what did the muscles learn to do in that workout? And so that's really the problem. And that's where you need someone that gives you a little bit better guidance of, like, we've got to make sure that we know which one of those.
Yeah, the tool is being used appropriately.
Right. Is it your heart rate that's limiting you, or is it your muscles that are limiting you?
Yeah.
Because the muscles at the end of the day must do the work. And I find that appealing what Glassman said, right? It's got to be empirical. You've got to be able to measure it. Otherwise, how do you know your direction?
Sure.
So thank God I'm a finance guy and I love spreadsheets. I mean, if I could share my screen right now, I would open up something and it's just littered with just beautifulness. It's so beautiful.
As a former accountant, that scares the shit out of me.
You love it. You do.
Yeah. Well, speaking of that, one of the things that you just recently recently announced or made public or whatever is you're working with Adidas on this Project Best.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
That project. So what I feel like what we do in the CrossFit space is we are experts in the fitness enthusiast, right? The person who doesn't want to specialize, they want to do a variety. They're not particularly great in any one thing. And what I have realized, and fortunately to work with a lot of elite CrossFitters, is they're demonstrating a level of fitness that's never been recorded ever before, because they have this balance genetically where they have a more even distribution of fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, right? So I'm mostly like 85% slow twitch. I'm never going to be strong. But how about these people that sit in the middle that aren't on the extremes, right? They're not going to the Olympics for endurance and they're not going for strength or speed because they sit in the middle. And this population of athlete has been virtually ignored until CrossFit comes along. And now what we're seeing is these individuals spanning these mutual ends of the spectrum where they're strong, but they have this incredible ability to endure. And when Adidas, when they came to me and they explained that they had this new program that was coinciding with a shoe launch. And the shoe launch was very interesting, and I'll explain that in a second. But the name of the program, like you said, was Project PB, and Project PB as in personal best. And they asked me, how do you define winning? And I mean, I've been lucky enough to win. And I said to him, I said, I think that you believe that winning is about setting a personal best. Even though you finish dead last, if you finish and get a personal best, that's what it's like to win. That's an individual win. And I'm like, well, I think that there is a lot of satisfaction in what you just said, but that's not winning. They know they didn't win. And I said, winning is about really opportunity when you win. And the opportunity when you win, you get access to a company like Adidas, where you get product, advanced product, and you get it for free. Instead of buying a pair of shoes for $250, you get it for free. And that creates a bigger advantage. Like when I did triathlons, there was a company called Campagnolo. It's an Italian bicycle equipment component manufacturer. There's two big ones in the world, right? Shimano and Campagnolo. And they were sponsoring me. And they came out with the first disc wheel that was made out of Kevlar. It was $2,000. And I got it for free. And in wind tunnels have proven that in a 40-kilometer bike time trial, which is the Olympic distance for triathlons, it saves you about a minute in time. Well, no one could afford to buy it, right? Triathletes are broke. And so it made it so that I would either go a minute faster on the bike ride, or I can then go slower on the bike ride and preserve for the run. It was an unfair advantage. And I got it for free because I won. And the other thing that winning does is it gets you access to good coaching, right?
Yeah.
It gets you good access to coaching, and you get it for free, and you get great programming as well, which gives you another advantage to keep winning. And so winners keep winning because of this privilege. And I said, that's what winning is. And they said, we've come out with this shoe that is a high-tech shoe. It's their Adizero line, and it's set multiple world records, and we're targeting around $100. And I'm like, that's insane. And they said, we would like for you to write a personalized 10K training program, just as you would do for a champion. And the target audience is the recreational runner.
Wow, that's cool.
So the average finishing time for a 10K is 1 hour and 2 minutes. So if you are a recreational runner, why are you following a coach that writes workouts for a sub 30-minute 10K? It's the wrong workout.
Yeah.
Right.
So like an example, marathon training programs, they tell you to run 20 miles. You know why that's 20 miles is because that's what the elites do. But if you are half the speed of an elite, why are you doing 20 miles? You're doing double the amount of running time as them. Right. Yeah. No wonder why you get hurt.
Yeah.
So I love that Adidas, that appealed to them, because that's the space that I'm interested in, is the person that wants to run the 10K and have a good experience.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
One that finishes really in an hour.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really cool.
The Olympian. I don't care about, you can run 25 minutes, whatever.
Yeah.
So that was cool.
Yeah, that really is. And that's so cool to hear too, because, that's like a big thing with us too, where we believe, I don't know, not to say like it's our moral obligation. I think that's a bit dramatic, but like we want to provide high quality coaching and experiences that are highly accessible. Mm-hmm. And the essence of what it is to win is sort of what you're describing.
That's right.
And that's not for as much as measurable, observable, repeatable, and empirical is important. There's also this felt sensation of the essence of winning. And, not to go so far as saying like, I am a winner or I am a loser, but like for people to have access to the essence of what it is to win at this different level is like really, really cool. And that's, again, one of the things that we really are trying to do our best to share and have like legit experiences that use, I mean, I think we're pretty humble to a fault, but like some of the highest levels of human performance, be it sport or is your life on the line type of stuff and training and approaches, without requiring you to put your fucking life on the line or go to Germany and be an Adidas sponsored athlete. Like that's just not happening. So it's really cool to hear you say that like
the access, making it accessible.
Yeah. That's awesome.
And the treatment, right? The treatment of because unless you're in that winning club, you don't even know it exists. And it's in my opinion, it's unfair. And I love in following what Glassman did of opening up the world's eyes for this middle population, which is 99% of the people out there, of this opportunity. And why should it be based upon privilege? Right. And that's my feeling, is like, I want people to experience this level of treatment. Now, you don't have to opt into it, but at least know it exists, that this is what they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, that program, I made an announcement at Wadapalooza, and I said I'd open it up for 5,000 downloads because it's free. You could still get it through Adidas Runners, but and that's really an interesting thing. But I opened up for 5,000, and it went in like 3 days, and then then Morning Chalk Up did it, and I did another 2,000, and so. But Adidas Runners, you can still access it through there, and that to me is what's really fascinating. It's a train the trainer program in 70 countries. And what they have is these ambassadors in these countries. They call them captains. And these captains have their own running clubs under the Adidas umbrella. And this program goes to them. I did a call last week with South America and Central America, all the captains on a Zoom call of the flow of these workouts. And this is how I would coach the workout as a coach. And they then take the workout with the personalized paces for that individual, and they distribute it to their local market. To me, that I must applaud Adidas that they want to empower the local market instead of one centralized figure. So Chris, you're going to train the trainer, and you're going to give them your knowledge, and they're going to use your knowledge and distribute it within their community to build their community. And it was genius. I've approached CrossFit with this idea, and I train the affiliate, where paying affiliates would have access to a personalized training program, as CrossFit subject matter expert in aerobic capacity. And we would do a training program, like a 2K training program. And if you're a paying member within that gym, you would have access through your gym. But I would train the gym on how I would coach this workout. Adidas was just significantly faster at pulling the trigger on that.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. That notion of being we talk about it a lot between the years. And one of the things we hope to do is, have a formal mechanism for us to, it kind of goes back to some of our roots of being like, unconventional warfare, Green Berets, like this notion of train the trainer, but really like a force multiplier. So, if we can empower one person to understand the language and then go off and do good things, they're a multiple. We're creating exponents, which is really cool, a really cool thing.
Well, I mean, that's what you've done for me, Bill. I mean, our conversations, and we've had 2 deep ones, it's changed my trajectory. And I think that's the key, is like you said, and I then will take that change and share those ideas with the people that I reach. And I think you're right. I think that's a very important piece.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think there's a lot of hoarding. People think of it in a hoarding type, but one person can never reach all of the communities, and
I
So
do.
yeah, go
I
ahead.
find that interesting. I do. I think that there are a lot of coaches that hoard their information, their content, and maybe they hoard it because of insecurities. Maybe it's incompetence. Maybe it's just that they feel it's their intellectual property and they don't want to share it. I don't, and maybe it's because I'm older. I feel like if I hoard, then what's my motivation to go and learn more? If you give everything away, you are vulnerable, but not if you're forward thinking,
Yeah.
right? And that's why I value our conversations, because it's like I finish and it's like I never thought about that in that way.
Right.
And that takes me down another rabbit hole, which creates all new content.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
awesome.
that's so awesome to hear. And if there's, certainly like other people, other things, but like, you've always been so generous with sharing information, putting your thoughts, your coaching, your expertise out there into the world.
And that inspires us as coaches to
without
do
a
the
doubt,
same.
100%,
So I think
100%.
Thank you.
Yeah, without
Thank
a doubt.
you.
So we have a couple questions people asked, and we'll pick three here. So someone asked, are there any new exciting ideas, methods, tech that you're engaging with to add to aerobic capacity for CrossFit people? And I guess other than this program.
Yeah.
Oh boy, you want a secret tip? So
We'll
yes.
get the NDAs out.
So I've spent a lot of time in looking at fast twitch, slow twitch athletes and programming them differently. So and I've talked about that some, but the area that I've been spending a lot of time with is building capacity from the bottom up versus the top down. And what I mean by top down is, like, if you improve your strength in a lift, then it makes all your other lifts easier, right? If I improve your speed, then all your other speeds are easier, right? They require less effort. Well, what if I improve your ability at this zone 2 intensity, at a low intensity, a recovery intensity? And what I mean by improve is that, let's say you do a 20-minute effort and you target your zone 2. For simple methods, take math tones 180 minus your age as your target heart rate. So 180 minus your age, and let's just say that you're 30, so your target's 150. What I want you to do is plus or minus 5 points, so stay between 145 and 155, do a 20-minute run and stay within that heart rate and record your average pace. And now what we're going to do is we're going to develop your ability at that particular intensity in a couple of different ways. We're going to increase your specific endurance, meaning you're going to maintain that speed, but we're going to test your ability to not go 20 minutes, but we're going to go 25. And can you stay within that heart rate by going longer? Because eventually those slow twitch fibers will fail. You'll recruit the fast, and all of a sudden now you got that glycolytic pathway and your heart rate's going to start rising. So we're going to extend the length of time at that particular intensity. The other way we're going to create improvement is what? Maintain the same distance, but what we're going to do, and heart rate, but what we're going to do is we're going to drive you in a faster speed. So we're going to keep dropping the speed from that average to a faster and faster speed. And so what I want to do is I want to start developing a higher level of precision at low intensities to attack from the bottom up. And that is not being done today.
Very cool.
Precision. I love that. You just opened up a world to think about, Chris. So thank you for that. That's awesome.
A little secret though, so don't share that with a lot of people.
No. Don't worry. Only like 13 people listen to the podcast, so your secret's good with, and there's 3. Your secret's good with us. Speaking of heart rate stuff, really cool question. Cool. I think puts things in perspective of what we're talking about. Anyway, working with athletes who are living with heart issues. This could be, heart abnormalities, heart surgeries, recovery, valve things. In your experience, have you worked with athletes who have, obviously this is no platform for medical advice, but have you seen anything with people living with, with heart realities?
I have not. No,
Okay.
I haven't. And yeah, but I would not shy away from that
Mm-hmm.
as a coach. I find that those are some challenges that open up my perspective. So, and I'll give you an example. I've been working with Steph Hammerman, who's a level 2 CrossFit coach, and she's got cerebral palsy, and she runs a mile using crutches in 1 hour. So again, 1 mile in 1 hour. And
Mm-hmm.
what I realized in working with athletes with cerebral palsy, the fatigue affects them in more ways than it affects an able-bodied individual, in that the brain, as they get tired, it delays the ability of sending the signal to the muscles to make them move. And so in some cases, when Steph in a mile for time, it would take her upwards of a minute if she stopped to get her legs moving again. Well, that's interesting to me. And I also work with some professional level boxers. And one of the things that is interesting is when you get punched in the head and you get knocked out unconscious, your reaction times get worse. And eventually that's going to force you out of the sport. And that's why you see such a reduction in MMA, is because of the lighter ounce gloves and the damage that does in terms of your ability to react. And so, like, you take a guy like Floyd Mayweather, who is so dominant at his age because he's never really been hit. Take that wisdom with that ability, and now you've got a guy that's invincible. And so for me, I never would have understood boxing and MMA and all the work that I do in jiu-jitsu and all of that space now if it wasn't for Steph. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Well, you're a student. I mean, that's what's wonderful. That's what we have a lot of respect about you, because you're not only, obviously at the top of the CrossFit coaching, endurance, aerobic capacity, all of that, an athlete, top of the podium, all of this, but at heart, you're a student,
Yeah.
and students never stop learning. And we have a thing that we believe everybody can be a student and everybody can be a teacher. And I know for a fact, be it with stuff we do here with Between the Ears, therapy, like I'm always learning from those I'm sort of in this teaching role with, because being a student is like kind of the essence of that. I don't know, maybe the worldview, but yeah, that makes total sense. And that's
Oh, I
really,
mean,
that's really
look at our
beautiful.
last lunch. We're not going into detail on it, but
Yeah.
our last lunch was that way with me. It was nothing more than nothing more than an education for me, and it was incredible. Yeah, I mean, yeah, like you said, we shut down that restaurant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Place I did have 3 croissants in one day, but that's for a separate conversation. We're not talking about nutrition here. This is sort of similar to people who overtrain. I'm sure you see this a lot, just knowing how CrossFitters are and athletes and all of that. Gone are the days of like you hit a hard Metcon in between lunch because you had a real job, like, and one workout a day got you to regionals. Overtraining, the mental and psychological fatigue that comes with that. What have you noticed with any athletes that might fall into this, trap of overtraining?
I see it a lot, and it's unfortunate. Unfortunately, in the sport of CrossFit, we're seeing younger and younger athletes come on, and when you're young, you're incredibly durable. You're very resilient. And unfortunately, that pace is not sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And you see the wreckage occur when athletes come on the scene, and then all of a sudden it's like, wow, they plateau early.
Yeah.
How are you plateauing if you're in you're 20 years old, 21 years old?
Right.
And the problem is that there is this need to push athletes too much too soon.
Yeah.
And it's not something new. This has been happening forever. I mean, you got a high school coach that is a high school football coach, and he's only going to have this kid for 4 years. He's going to make that kid do as much as he possibly can, because that may be the ticket out to, college. Yeah. Same thing in running. Like these kids in cross country and track in high school, over the summer, they're making them run 60, 70 miles a week, and they're 14, 15 years old. And I think that the problem is that you've got to question the motivation of the person who is asking them to do it. Is it in their interest or your interest? Right. And any kid that if you dangle the podium in front of them is obviously going to opt for the podium.
Right.
Yeah. But to what damage is it going to do? And I took a lot of heat with, like Haley Adams, and why aren't you working on her speed? And why isn't, you balance everything? Because everything that I did with Haley was balanced. She did speed work, but she also did long distance. We didn't focus on weaknesses because she hadn't developed yet. She was very late in hitting maturity. And so it was like, how do you know that her speed in running is going to be a limitation? And sure enough, what she placed like at the games 3 years ago in that sprint event, when she get like third, because she finally hit the maturity. And so that's where I feel like this is a hot button for me. I have 3 kids, and it's like, who are you doing it for? Are you doing it because you didn't develop as an athlete and you're making your kid do it so you can live through them, or as the coach? Yeah. And that's a big frustration for me, that we need to be and exercise a little more patience.
Well, and for maybe not the higher end athletes, but them as well, it takes a toll then on someone's sense of self, and
yep. Well,
it ruins the sport for them, and that could be the end of sport or fitness or whatever for people for a long time. And that's really sad, because most of these people aren't going on to be professionals. So
yep.
It's really doing such a disservice.
It really is. It really is. A lot of people don't know like when they're actually, and this is another important piece, they don't know when they're actually overtraining. Like, how do you know? What does it feel like? How do you know? And we've been talking about being measurable. Well, so let's just say that you wear a heart monitor when you go on a bike ride, or you do, any type of a workout or run. Well, let's say you go out and you're trying to do a particular heart rate. You're just, and all I do is I look at heart rate as a measurement. It's not something that I guide on unless it's like in that low intensity zone 2. If it's higher heart rates than zone 2, it's just a guide of going, oh, it's the same thing. I would look at my watch and going, oh, okay, I'm going such and such pace. It's a guide.
Yeah.
But if you, let's say, are trying to hit, let's say, when you look down and it's like, wow, I should be, at a heart rate, typically at this speed, I should be really at a heart rate of 160, 165. I'm suffering, but I look down and my heart rate's significantly low. I can't elevate my heart rate, or my fatigue is so high at that relative heart rate, that same heart rate, something's off. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so that's when heart rate monitors are hugely valuable, because we all, after a period of time, and I'm talking about recreational athletes, we know our heart rate based upon how we're feeling. And we could look down and go, oh, I'm probably going to be at a heart rate of around 90% of my max because I'm really inside out right now. Sure enough, there we are. It's a great tool. But sometimes when you're overtrained, there's a mismatch between the way you feel and what the watch is telling you.
Yeah.
And there's your information. I'm overdoing it. And not just by a little. When it's finally is showing up on the watch, it's like, man, you are deep in the hole. Mm-hmm. And so, because athletes, they can't, if you say, how you feeling? I'm great.
Right.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah.
And that's where when I write workouts, my workouts, I've written them for you guys. They're very precise.
Yeah,
you're going to do this amount of distance, this speed. It needs to be done in this amount of time. And oh, by the way, we're going to also measure your rest. So your rest, if we're sitting in a chair, great. But what if we're moving? Then I'm going to prescribe, meaning you're going to do a 100-meter walk that I needed in 1 minute exactly. So we're going to control every variable. And the reason why I do it is, What if you can't make the workout paces? Tells me there's something else going on.
Yeah.
And so that's why and that's what elites get. Elites get that type of information. That's why when we were talking about, Adidas and this Project PB, how do they know? It's because they can't hit the numbers, or they come back and they go, that was an impossible workout. That shouldn't have been.
Right.
Oh man, there's so much I want to dive into there.
I know.
Oh my
we're
God,
at an hour and 5.
It's like, in the pinata. This is just. I'm gonna just give a scary glimpse into what's happening in my brain right now. This pinata, okay, and instead of a blindfold, you do the blindfold.
Yes.
I have one of those like Terminator goggles on where I am getting all of this information. And instead of like a wiffle ball bat, I have one of those barbarian spiked things. And like this pinata just came right through. I just want to hit this thing and dive in and rip so much of that stuff apart. But maybe we'll have to have a part two. A part two. But Chris, what where people can find you, Instagrams, handles, all of that stuff. Let's do that as we come to land.
Yeah, the easiest way to reach me is aerobiccapacity.com, all one word, obviously. Website, that's Instagram, that's Facebook. Yeah, aerobiccapacity.com. We're going to be loading a bunch of new seminars, so if there's some interest in doing our one-day seminar, you're welcome.
Yeah, because I looked recently and there weren't. I was looking for dates, and I noticed you're probably regrouping and launching some. So for anyone that looked recently, look again soon, because that seminar is packed full and such a valuable place to go for people that want to dig in more and be curious. So
definitely.
Well, thank you. No, I've had a great time, at CrossFit Morristown and the times that we've been out there, and no, I appreciate that. Heidi's been really good about, because it's been a long winter for me, and like she wants me to kind of catch my breath, and she's been the one to schedule those things, and so
that's good. You need that.
I know.
The watch isn't matching the experience, Chris.
Yes.
There's watch isn't matching there's a disconnect. The subjective doesn't match the objective. You need to go to Hawaii.
I have a very hard time taking my own advice.
Oh, yeah, we all do.
Yeah, welcome. Right.
We will be out your way probably in June. So offline, we'll figure out dates and hope that we can have a little more time.
I know where to find
start early in the day and have more time.
Yeah.
So
I know where to find you guys. I know where you go when you're in town.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you. Please say hi to Heidi and enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Always the best.
Thank you.
Bye.